Hello everyone out there, it's Rectitude Media, and today I'd just like to talk about a story that's very close to home here in Toronto. A man named Gregory Allen Elliott has just been found not guilty of harassment in a case that sets a very disturbing precedent. Although Mr. Elliott was found innocent, I think it's best to take things from the beginning for those who are unaware of this case. The story starts back in 2012 when Stephanie Guthrie, a prominent women's rights activist who promotes herself as a gender justice consultant, decided to lead a social media rage mob against Benjamin Daniel, a Northern Ontario man who created a very low-quality game where you can click Anita Sarkeesian's face repeatedly until it gives the appearance that she's been beaten up. And he launched it on Newgrounds.com. Ben made the game as a statement against Anita Sarkeesian's position on Gamergate and her attempt to fund a Kickstarter to do a series on how video games are sexist and racist, with a complaint that she refused to take legitimate criticism when other people disagree with her. This outraged Miss Guthrie and her followers, and so soon they decided to try and destroy his life any way they could by contacting local police, newspapers, and practically his social media. This is where Gregory Elliott, 53, comes into the picture. Mr. Elliott, at the time, was a local artist who also dabbled in activism and was originally a friend of Miss Guthrie's and her followers, even donating a poster to one of Miss Guthrie's events. When he heard that Miss Guthrie was going to lead a feminist social media rage mob on Mr. Daniels, he just disagreed with their tactics on taking the low road. This disagreement would not stand for Miss Guthrie and her followers, who then began to turn on Gregory Elliott by harassing him for having a difference in opinion. This led to a bitter Twitter battle, where at one point the woman who supported Miss Guthrie tried to even paint Mr. Elliott as a pedophile. This led to Miss Guthrie and two other women to believe that they had grounds to incriminate Mr. Elliott for harassment, and so they notified the police. This also led to a very lengthy trial in which Mr. Elliott was banned from the internet during the duration, where he made most of his money from selling his art. While he was waiting for a trial, he had an angry feminist ruin one of his pieces of art by throwing coffee at a Toronto coffee shop. Well, after having this story publicized by men's rights activists and feminists alike, a judge found him innocent on these charges. Personally, I'm glad that he was found innocent. After reading the tweets from all sides, I can clearly say that Mr. Elliott was on the receiving end of the hatred. Yes, there were a few bouts of name-calling, but I'd be pissed off too if someone was constantly calling me a pedophile for no reason. I recommend anyone watching this to go check what was actually said by both parties online and judge for themselves. Now, I live in a very left-leaning country, and one thing you can be sure of is that if Mr. Elliott had said anything that could possibly be perceived as threatening in a court of law, he'd be found guilty now, and this would be chalked up as a win for the third-wave cry police. This sentiment is evident from the judge presiding over the case, Brent Nazin, as he said that there is no doubt that Stephanie Guthrie and Heather Riley were harassed by Mr. Elliott over several months into 2012, either due to the volume or content of his tweets, but that alone does not meet the legal threshold for a conviction. Then he also went to say that Mr. Elliott was in his rights to explain his position, although the judge was completely critical of Mr. Elliott defending himself the entire trial. And that's what pisses me off about this whole thing. I mean, you have a guy that's, into the activism scene, is an artist who was even on the same side of Miss Guthrie and offered to, his work for free practically. He disagreed with him, and then he had to deal with months of rage mobs, charges, destruction of his character by the leftist media. He lost his job, called a pedophile, was banned from the whole internet for a couple of years during this whole duration of the trial, and his nightmare just kept being drawn out. I mean, the guy had his artwork destroyed by some crazy feminazi, and the mainstream media crucified him in the court of public opinion, especially when the alternative news outlet stepped in and got a rather successful crowdfunding platform to help him with the legal costs. Isn't that ridiculous? All that because some moronic feminist wanted to throw someone under the bus for having a penis and disagreeing with him. Miss Guthrie and the two women who started this nonsense, one of which dropped their allegations at the start of the trial, knowing it was probably going to be a total gong show, even admitted that they weren't afraid for their safety before or even during the entire trial. Yet Mr. Elliott is apparently the asshole. They could have just left him alone with his difference in opinion and leave it at that, but no, they had to try and destroy him completely, Which really goes to show you why people everywhere are calling these types of feminists cry-bullies, because that's exactly what they are. Man, I support free speech, and I support human rights, regardless of gender. I could care less what consenting adults do in their bedroom, as it doesn't bother me living out my life. Everyone has the right to be happy, or unhappy for that matter. I just find it ridiculous that those involved in the rage mob get off completely free, and they still get to try to con everyone around them into believing that they are the victims. This is complete and utter bullshit in my opinion. I'm all for going after people who make serious threats on people's lives. Those people need to be held accountable for their actions. Yet I also understand that people get pissed off, as anyone who's ever posted in the comments section or on a feed fully knows well. This is why I try not to get too angry on social media, because it's just really impossible to tell whether or not someone is venting or if they're genuinely meaning what they're saying. This is what lies in stake, folks. These restrictions of free speech isn't something new or Canadian. It's happening at an alarming rate around the world. Did the CBC post the fact that Mr. Elliot had his life practically destroyed for disagreeing with fake feminists who care more about some guy in Northern Ontario making fun of their idol than they do about the execution of women in countries like Saudi Arabia who just want to be able to drive in public without a male escort? No! It's a total and complete fraud. And I'm really sick of seeing how you're getting all these, third-wave feminazis that are starting to come from Toronto. Toronto is the asshole of Canada. I'm sorry, but I have to say it. Everyone outside of Ontario full well knows that all the pieces of shit pretty much reside in Toronto. I mean, you got a crack-smoking, politician who almost, he was mayor and is still in the political scene, even though he had the whole cancer thing, and his brother's, within it too, with the Doug Ford and Rob Ford connection. It's just, I cannot believe how ridiculous this is getting, folks. I mean, this is the sickness of the regressive left, and I think that term is perfectly fitting. I mean, I don't adhere to any set side of the political spectrum. I know life isn't as simple as that. I have views that can be considered varied, and I don't give in to any set ideology. I'll call out rapists, pedophiles, misogynists, and misandrists for what they are. This is ultimately why the feminism movement is failing in popularity. Because it's not about celebrating what makes us different while empowering each other. It's meant to make you feel guilty about being born with a sexual apparatus that you had no control of deciding at birth. It's a system that is meant to cause division and mistrust, one that promotes selfish practices where people get their self-esteem by flipping out like spoiled children and name-calling others. I'm totally fine with seeing women in more trades and jobs that are physically demanding. More power to them. Just like I don't care if guys become hairstylists, nurses, or fashion designers. I encourage anyone who knows what they really want to do go out and do it, regardless of the stigmas associated with that profession. When we go back to judging people on their actions and not on their thought crimes, we might actually have a chance for mankind to flourish in the future. And this is what's scary about it, is that, you've got politicians that agree with the New World Order agenda, like you have Marie Le Pen, who, whether or not you agree with her politics or whatnot, by saying that, we have to be careful about these refugees that are coming in, that none of them are terrorists, because even ISIS themselves, practically said that we're going to be bringing a wave of jihadists in with these refugees, and other imams have actually said it too. That's a legitimate criticism, yet, no. You try to come out in public and say that, well, then you get demonized. In fact, she's actually been charged by the French government, and then you've got Trump, who, he didn't say to ban all Muslims, he said all Muslims until we can get this, Syria situation figured out. The same thing, Mr. Jimmy Carter did with the Iranian crisis when he banned Iranians from coming over to America. And it's just funny how people who, it's almost like now as if it is a thought crime to think about, well, maybe we shouldn't do this, maybe we should hold this religion or these people or this group, a little bit more accountable, or, obviously there's a lot of different differences in the arguments and in the stories and stuff, and different issues that have their, grounds in many different aspects, but it's just crazy how, nowadays it's almost as if, anything that's masculine or anything that's, feminine is, bad. It has to be multi-sex. It has to be, it has to be in your face. It has to be, 5-year-olds being asked what their sexual preference is, like you're getting in like certain schools and stuff, which is just ridiculous. I mean, I believe that there's a certain amount of education that has to be given to children, but I mean, there's a certain time and an age where they start to have those feelings, where that's probably the best time to actually, go and teach them about it. Not when they're at the point where they don't know what's going on. This is all really just kind of starting to look like it's cultural programming. And the third wave feminist movement is a prime example of just, if they were going to be going out and talking about the injustices that are being brought out in the Middle East and stuff like that, then I would totally agree with what they're, And if it was more about, just empowering women in, like, local communities, get out there, find a job, do something, like, make life so that it's good for you, then I would totally agree with that. But no, it's all about grouping women into these online Twitter mobs and disagreeing with anyone and just like going after people that disagree with them, which is ridiculous. I'm all for the woman that paved the way for, modern women's rights issues and feminism and stuff like that. I'm all for paying people the same. I mean, that whole, the wage gap myth, I actually think has a lot of truth to it, because, I mean, okay, maybe Hollywood, yeah, like, I can see a lot of females, actresses getting paid less than their male counterparts. That's a huge problem. But, I mean, anywhere else in society, I mean, you would expect that if women were paid less than men, then you would walk into a restaurant or walk into a place and it was all women. As if every job would be given to women over men. And because they'd have to pay them less. So obviously that's a more incentive for the company to hire more women than men. But that's not the case, and reality has a way of checking itself so that, you kind of blow away these myths that have been, perpetuated by people out there, who obviously aren't really in it for their movement or for their gender or for their group, whether it's sexual, whether it's race, whether it's gender. I mean, it just really kind of gets me that there's a lot of people out there who are just pushing it for their own selfish means. They're not actually doing it so that they hold people who are causing harm accountable, and are changing things so that it makes it easier for, like back in the day where, women were allowed to become doctors, or, women were allowed to become tradesmen and stuff like that. Now it's changing, and I think that's cool. Whatever people really want to do with their lives, they should be able to pursue it. And, nowadays that usually involves, putting yourself ridiculously in debt. But, if somebody wants to go through that effort and then try to find a job where they feel like they're doing something good, then by all means, yeah, that's where activism is definitely needed. But, when you have people that are just all about tribalist warfare, where it's, our group is better than your group is oppressing us, we don't like you, you're go away racist, or go away sexist, or, everything is racist, everything is sexist and stuff like that. Yeah, there are some, like societal norms that we've had for years of prejudices that, do exist. Like, there's no getting around that. But, society, modern society, is, especially since the 90s, has really made it so that society is more acceptable. Everyone knows a gay person in school or something like that nowadays, when before it used to be, a serious, like something that you kept on the down low and you didn't tell anyone. Or, if a woman was a little bit more tomboyish, back in the day, people would make fun of that. Or if a guy had glasses, people would make fun of that. Or, there was a time where people would make fun of geeks, and now it's like, the whole thing is like, nerds and geeks are cool. You look at Comic-Con, you look at the fact that pretty much our whole society now is based towards the acceptance of what used to be considered a minoritized group in society, and I just think it's really kind of interesting how there's certain forces at play that have a lot of money, and they really like to try to shove everything down our throats, especially political correctness, especially this whole, everything has to be leftist. I mean, like here, I could never stand the conservatives. I don't believe that much in right-wing agendas, and mostly those parties are catering to multi-million-dollar businesses. Let's get down to the basic facts. But I mean, you also have left side of the political spectrum that are, paid for by these non-government organizations that have no real power, that aren't elected by people, but they get to make all these policies, which is ridiculous. I mean, you've got the George Soroses of the world funding Black Lives Matter when he himself is a Nazi collaborator who used to sell out the Jews, so that he didn't get executed himself. I mean, when you look at people like that, they're just in it to race bait and cause division. Those people need to be held accountable, but yet those people ever get thrown in jail? No, they're too rich. They're too big to jail. And the more you keep looking at the structure of this whole, you have to be completely open, you have to have this political idea, you have to be accepting of this, and this. And, let's take this case, for example. I mean, you have a guy who clearly was just trying to defend why he didn't agree with these feminists. And instead of having a reasonable conversation with him, no, they escalated it by not only just calling him a pedophile, by, just completely trying to ruin his life with this huge social media rage. And what I think about that is when you're using the effect of the mob to go after someone, they don't really fully know what's going on. They just see one post, they disagree with it, and then it's all bitch, 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 bitch. They don't actually take the time to see, well, maybe, he's just kind of, coming from his perspective, and he doesn't, believe that all men are rapists, or that, that going after some guy in Northern Ontario for a stupid game that he made on Newgrounds that probably no one's really going to play anyways, is a target for a full frontal assault, to make his life, to phone the police and try to have him charged, which is like, and I mean, you get like Thunderfoot too on YouTube, and there's a lot of other channels. There's men's rights activists, and there's some things I disagree with and some things I agree with. But I mean, there's men's rights activists out there who do a good job at just showing how ridiculous that the feminist, this third wave feminist movement is just completely making themselves lose all credibility by starting campaigns like #KillAllMen. It's just so ridiculous how you get these just like bull dykes running stuff. And I don't like to use that term because I don't like to use demeaning terms, but that's practically what they are. They're angry butch lesbians who don't like the fact that men exist on this planet. And you know what? Whatever they do in their group of circles, I don't really care. It doesn't really bother me. But I mean, the fact that they're actually trying to fully go after people for just disagreeing. I mean, freedom of speech, we don't exactly have the Second Amendment like they have in the States. Oh, what am I saying? The First Amendment. The Second Amendment's the guns. I go to show you I'm Canadian right there. But anyways, I mean, the First Amendment in the States where you have the freedom of speech. I mean, here in Canada, we kind of do have the freedom to express what you want as long as it doesn't offend anyone else, right? So, I mean, anybody could be offended by anything that anyone really says when you get down to the brass tacks of it. And I mean, we have set a very creepy precedent here in Canada. I mean, how many, what are they going to go after next? What's the next person that's going to be charged for, speaking out against what he believes? Or I know they already have so that anybody who speaks out against the fact that we're bringing Sunni Muslims over here from a country that was originally helped with Turkey to pretty much try to take out the Assad regime. So I mean, you don't know who you're getting in there. And I mean, that whole plane load of Syrian refugees that came from Ankara, Turkey, weren't even Syrian. They were living a decent life in Turkey, and yet we decided to adopt them. People that didn't have any militaristic, or like any kind of like disaster with their houses. They were living fine, pretty much. And they had that other thing about the kid who came over, who drowned on that boat from Syria, the little toddler. Well, his dad came over because he needed better teeth. He came to Europe because they figured he'd get free dental. So, I mean, the media really does not like to perceive or to tell you all the facts about what's going on with both sides of any argument. It's all geared to make it like you see the dead baby in the water and you're like, oh my god, I feel so bad for those people. And I do. I mean, you can't help but feel bad for them. I mean, the Western interventionism has practically led to the fact that Libya is a complete war zone and that Africa is completely destabilized because the UN and NATO decided to go in there and take out Gaddafi. And they used Al-Qaeda to do it. This is common knowledge. In fact, you ask, for some reason the media would like to make you think that Al-Nusra has never had any affiliations with Al-Qaeda. And I know I'm kind of straying off topic here, but I'm just saying, this story, the whole issue of the whole third wave feminism, the whole issue about this whole Black Lives Matter movement, the whole issue like you're having about the Russia hating and the fact that we're supposed to side with the Ukraine government, even though, they're practically neo-Nazis that are running that country, and the people there that are living there only have, that's the reason why they're dressing up in like Chewbacca suits and running practically fictionalized characters as members of government, because it's such a gong show that if you try to fully talk about the problems in that country, you get executed. So you have to go through the joke way to kind of get some people to see what's going on. And the media, the mainstream media, is completely responsible for this perception that we have, because they don't tell you the important facts, or they don't tell you why this side is thinking about, I mean, they were look how long it took for the media to report on the New Year's sexual assaults in freaking Cologne in Germany. And I mean, they're also barely talking about the rise in gay bashing in Europe. You have the same leftists, you have the same people like Trudeau, you have the same leftist organizations that are all talking about how we need to be open and accepting of sexuality, of different cultures. Yet they're trying to bring in people that have a culture that is completely does not work with their ideology. I mean, Sharia law and just the way that they have that kind of system over there is in like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, a lot of countries over there don't exactly take too kindly to stuff like butt sex or whatnot, and the left embraces it. And if you question it at all, you're a horrible person. You're a right-wing fanatic, and just by having a question. And that's what it's come down to nowadays. It's not, let's have a well-balanced discussion or debate where we hear where both sides of people's argument are on this. I mean, you kind of do sometimes on some panels. They might give like a certain amount of time to someone to debate about it. But for the most part, what you really see on the media is just them trying to be like, oh, look at all these refugees. Oh, look at all this. I mean, like a CBC, the way if you search up the article on Gregory Allen Elliott and read it practically, like, without them saying it, they practically try to put it in a way where it infers that that no matter what, that Mr. Elliott was wrong, that he did say mean and hateful things. They don't say anything about the fact that these crazy fucking bitches completely ruined his fucking life. But they're okay with saying that, he said a few things because, obviously if someone called you a pedophile, you'd be pretty pissed off too, and you'd call them, fat and cows or pigs or, make some animal references to their names or whatnot, as opposed to actually full out going fucking, saying, I'm going to find you, I'm going to hunt you down, or anything stupid like that some people say when they get a little angry, I mean, that is really the ultimate question, is how do we know that someone is, when they're talking on free, like online, whether or not they're joking or not? I mean, when you're listening to someone talk about it, by the, the sound of their voice, the tone, or just by the, whether or not they laugh afterwards, if they're joking, or if they're just like at that point where they're just like, fuck man, I have nothing better else to, nothing else I could possibly do, so I might as well vent, and that's a right everybody has. But when it gets to the point where it talks about other people's safety, then, that's where you really have to worry out there. And I'm going to leave it at that, just because I just want to let everyone know to, assert your rights, say what really, what you believe, but also be very careful what you say, because it can be turned against you nowadays. And with the more control being put on the internet, with the TPP and intellectual property concerns being touted as the absolute nowadays, we really have to be careful. I mean, I don't even really post the CBC pictures anymore, or different websites, just because from what I've been finding from alternative websites is that they're really cracking down. Facebook, YouTube has gone after people hardcore for having any kind of political opinion on YouTube, and trying to get monetization. So there's a lot of demonetized videos out there. You got Facebook trying to pass these programs now where they're trying to go against anyone that's critical of Islam, or critical of the policy of bringing a bunch of people in for free, while there's other people that are on waiting lists that are getting screwed over, or the fact that they're only bringing in one group of people, they're not bringing in the Christians or the other minorities of Syria that have been getting slaughtered. But we don't hear about that. No, in fact, they have to be Muslim. For every 100 Muslim families, they maybe bring one Christian family in. And I mean, I'm not even really religious, but I think that's just total bullshit. I mean, if you're going to be bringing in people that are refugees, bring in all the refugees from that area. Don't just nitpick and bring in ones to support your voter base. And that's pretty much what it comes down to here in Canada. And it's starting to look mostly as a globalized thing. I mean, when those rich assholes get together at Bilderberg or at Davos, do you really think they're talking about the well-being of people? No, they're looking at ways that they can pretty much control the fabric of society as much as they possibly can to bring about their agenda of a new world order. And as stupid and as crazy as that sounds, it's true. I mean, I'm not gonna go on any more about it. I mean, you can easily do your research, but this is just one tiny little story, one tiny little example of how Canada, this country, is just, for the most part, they are everyone is completely brainwashed. There's people out there who are catching on, who kind of see this whole, the fact that a guy almost went to jail for, disagreeing, not even being violent or, threatening, just disagreeing. And then the whole time, while he was in court trying to defend his pissed off, defensive posts, the judge is still being like, well, you probably shouldn't have done that. Well, you probably shouldn't have said that. I could see that as being possibly offensive. It's like, for fuck's sakes, man, they called him a pedophile, they fucking tried to destroy his whole goddamn life. And they're the ones who initiated it. Yet they get no responsibility. Either no coverage in the media for the fact that they acted just as irresponsibly, if not worse and more irresponsible than Mr. Elliott, or no. In fact, CBC, I think the Star was pretty bad for it. All the predominantly liberal newspapers out there, pretty much peg him off as being an evil bad guy who just happened to get off because the judge couldn't find the right post or the right the right threat or whatnot, and that all these women are just fighting for women's rights and they're social justice warriors and champions of society, which is total and utter bullshit. Anyways, that's enough for my rant. You guys take care out there and keep on rocking in the free world for much longer as it stays free. Peace.